Grant Wood's interview. Take one, marker, soft sticks. I had interned for his predecessor, John Rhodes, who was minority leader of the House, when I was in college. I went to Occidental College, but I'm a native Arizonan, and Rhodes was my congressman, and I was lucky enough to intern for him. And then I stayed close with Mr. Rhodes and his staff as I went to law school, and then I was a public defender. And I got a call from one of his staff people saying that there was this guy who he was moving to Arizona, and he was going to run probably for Mr. Rhodes' seat if Mr. Rhodes retired, and that I needed to meet him. So I was pretty skeptical of that. Back in those days especially, the native Arizonans were very sensitive to someone just moving here, and now I'm going to run for Congress. But I said, out of respect to Mr. Rhodes, I would go meet with the candidate, who was John McCain. And so I walked in very skeptical, and I spent about half an hour with him. And when I walked out, I was 100% for him. It was that simple. Now, little did I know when I walked into that meeting that that was going to be the beginning of a lifetime relationship. And little did I know that I was going to walk in and meet one of the greatest people I would ever meet in my life. So that's how I met him, and so I certainly wanted to be involved in the campaign, and my family got behind him, and all of our friends and everybody we could got behind him, and I was with him election night, which was the primary election. He was running against three people who were longtime Arizonans. They'd been in the legislature, or one of them was a veterinarian. He was actually the toughest guy. Lieberman had one of the great lines for me. When he ran for president, he called a friend of mine who was the Attorney General of Oklahoma, and he went through his whole spiel of why and he's a former Attorney General, why he wanted to, ask her for his support. And he went on for like 2 minutes, and then my buddy, who's Mike Turpin from Oklahoma, he said, "Joe, you got my support, but not for any of those reasons. You have the one quality that I look for in a president. You know who I am." And that's all I care about. So. Lieberman told us later, he goes, probably my 3 favorite phone calls when I ran for president, that was one of them, because he was telling the truth. You know who I am, that's all I care. Look, most people who run for office, even the best of them, they're all right. And you're thinking, yeah, he or she, they'd be fine. They'd probably do a good job, and I like them. John McCain, I mean, he had it all. You could just tell. He knew the issues backwards and forwards. He wasn't, learning them off of a card or saying trite things. He knew the issues already because of his time, I think. One, because he's an educated person and always has kept up on things, but also his time as Navy liaison, I mean, he knew everything. He knew Washington well. He was friends with all the top players in Washington. His life experience was like nothing I'd ever heard before. I think today, looking back, he's led one of the more unique and amazing American lives ever. And just what he'd done up until then was, phenomenal. And his service to his country, his motivation was very clear. It was clear from the first time I met him, and it's been clear in every time I've been with him, which is thousands of times now. And that is, it's all about service to his country. It's what it's all about. A lot of people say that. Most people say that. That's usually part of it. For him, that's it. That's all of it. And you could tell that right off the bat. So to walk in there here in my home state, I went in thinking, well, why is he moving to Arizona? And I walked out saying, wow, thank God he moved to Arizona. It's fantastic. I mean, what a break for our state, that this guy, if we're successful, is going to be an advocate for us and our state. And I could see also that I've always been very idealistic. I was idealistic then, and I still am. I saw in him someone who could help the country be what it should be and can be. And that's pretty amazing to see all of that in 30 minutes, but I did. And nothing ever shook my confidence or changed my mind, ever. Behind closed doors, out in public, it's been an amazing ride. That was a challenge, for sure, because not everybody's going to get to meet him and be around him. So I think that the idea was, one, to get him in front of as many people as you could. That means he was going to have to work very hard. I don't think we knew it at the time, but we certainly, everyone's appreciated it over the years. If it needs to be done, or it should be done, and the only thing standing in the way is inconvenience, or it's too much work or too much hassle, that's a non-starter with John McCain. He will do it. I don't care what it is. He'll fly 24 hours. He'll work 24 hours. He'll work till midnight in a campaign and get up at 5 a.m. He'll do hundreds or thousands of town halls, whatever it takes. So he knocked on, I don't know how many doors he knocked on, but he every day was out knocking on doors, door to door to door to door to door, all summer long. Now remember, it gets to be 115, 118. He's very fair-skinned. That probably wasn't the greatest idea, frankly. I mean, we look back on that, and I think that wasn't too smart, but you couldn't talk him out of it. So he went everywhere. He met everybody. He went door to door every day for months and months and months. And that's what it took. It took people just being exposed to him. And when they saw him, they saw what I saw and what others had recognized, and that was that we were lucky that he was here. Not resentful that he'd moved to our state. Hey, every state, you're proud of your state and the people in your state. And I was proud of Arizona, and there were a lot of great people in Arizona. But, there's a lot of losers in every state too. So just because you're from the state doesn't mean anything, frankly, when it's all said and done. So I think people became convinced. Now, he threw a line on them in the first debate that ended the carpetbagger controversy, kind of famously now, and that is that someone, I think the guy from Tempe, took a shot at him, and he said, well, sorry, but the longest I've ever lived anywhere in my life is in Hanoi. And that was the end of that discussion, frankly. It really didn't come up again. I think that was his response. I don't know. I don't know that was pre-planned. I don't think so. A guy named Jay Smith ran his campaign, and Jay had run Mr. Rhodes' previous last few campaigns and was his press secretary. And Jay was just a brilliant strategist and great guy. And he might have been involved in helping craft that. I don't know, but my recollection is. That was fairly spontaneous. And then, John's never, he hasn't really ever worn that on his sleeve. He doesn't like to do that. If I've had 1,000 conversations, more than that, if I've had 5,000 conversations with him, a handful have been about his time as a POW. But, there are a few stories that he's been willing to tell to the public. And those were very effective. When people heard that, it was like, wow, again, this is a special person. So, so he won. It was a big victory. They weren't,
But
prior to the campaign, but it came out clearly in the campaign. There's no doubt about that. And again, just a couple of anecdotes here or there about his time there, and of course, the heroism that he showed there. And I think, I think obviously the majority of people reacted how I reacted, and that is, wow, we're lucky this guy's with us. We're glad he moved here. Well, back then, I think people, the majority of people didn't know him that well. I think I looked at my job when I worked for him, clearly was to get him in front of as many people as possible. We wanted to have meetings with everybody who was anybody. And he loves town halls. That's where that started. And I'm not a big fan of town halls, but he loves them. Can't stop him from doing them. I was AG for 8 years. I probably did, I don't know, a handful. I'm not a big fan of those. He did, he did them nonstop, but that was good for us because, again, people didn't know who he was. So I had an easy job, really, with him, because with most politicians, you get the meeting, and then these people have their meeting, and then you've got to go back as staff and persuade them why the guy's actually better than he seemed. With John, you just had to get him to the meeting. Once they met with him, it was sold. So it was just a matter of getting people together, basically. He's very good at listening to whatever the person has to say and responding, and rather than just some rote thing. I think he had a brochure. He handed it to him, introduced himself, and then he would just, then he would respond. And let's face it, the way it works, especially again, you got to remember, it was well over 100 degrees every day, without exception, when he was running, and he's still out there. So he's sweating, this is rough, and most people don't treat. I've gone door to door myself. I've gone with him, but I've also gone myself, and it's not the greatest. Most people aren't that crazy about it. However, they do remember that. I do believe it's effective. But so he would just engage with them. He'd just talk with them. Now, if someone was rude, John being John, he'd walk down, turn around and say, "Oh, thank you very much," and turn around and go, "What that guy." I mean, that happened 100 times, but that's John. It was hilarious, But there was no stopping him. And frankly, truth be told, I think the campaign was happy to have him out there. It was good politics, but also he wasn't around, micromanaging everything, because this was his first race. Later, I think he was a very good candidate in letting the professionals run the campaign. But man, when it's your first time, you just got to make sure everything's working right. So they were happy to get rid of him for a while, I think. Well, it's a sense of, it's ambition, but it's again, I think one of the main characteristics of John McCain that has always been there, from high school on, is when he sets his mind on something, then he will do it. Okay, no amount of work is too much. He will do it. He'll put in the time. He'll put in the effort. That has always been true. I have talked with people over the years who knew him in high school and wrestled with him and things like that. And the guy, they would tell me he hasn't changed a bit. And I certainly agree with that. I don't think he's changed a bit. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. No,
so in that election, he needed to, if he would have had the energy of a regular candidate, then he would have lost. All of them. I mean, really all of them, because it's amazing to me how um, even talking about them one-on-one, how he downplays his own role and anything about him, and draws attention to the others. He's very comfortable talking about the others and all the things that they did and some amazing things that happened. He really just views it as a matter of fact, anything that happened to him. But yeah, I mean, I think all of them were amazing. I wish I could, you have to find out the guy's name. I don't remember the guy's name, but you know, John was one of the main, along with Senator Kerry, one of the main people that brought back the rapprochement with Vietnam, and I think it was a mark of the man that with all he went through, he became a champion for the people of Vietnam. And you know, so during that time, I remember, you know, Walter Cronkite went back with John, first visit back to Vietnam and all that. And when you talk to him about forgiving everybody, he did forgive them and has forgiven them, with a couple of exceptions. And the one guy what I remember is that there was one guy when he was in solitary who would come and give him his, he was a big guy, I think, which is unusual, and would give him his little bowl of gruel every day. But he wanted John to, I think, salute or something like that. And he wouldn't do it. And so the guy hit him in the face and then sat down, knocked him flying, and set down his bowl of gruel and then left. So then the next day, the same thing happens. He expects him to salute, or whatever it was, pay him some sort of homage. John told him to, you know, you. Guy hits him in the face. Remember, he's very frail at the time, and all that. Goes flying. Okay, well, that's one thing to do that. He did that every day, every single day. I don't know how long this went on. A year? More? You have to ask him, but that told me something about him too. No surprise. I would bet my house that on day 1 and on day 300, he'd tell that guy to off, even though he's going to get hit right in the face. So to me, I thought, wow, this is, you know, I think, I talk to people, you know, people used to, when I was AG, the California AG was a huge John Wayne fan. He loved John Wayne, you know. I used to give him a hard time saying, hey, you know, that was fake. I don't know if you know that, but I'm sure he was a good guy, but he was acting, okay? There's a script. That wasn't real life. This is real life. That was John Wayne, real life, you know. That was the American hero in real life. When no one would know, most people, I'm sure everybody thought he would never walk out of there. But he knew. He knew. And I think that was a mark of the man. He's tough. Well, at some point in time there, he definitely had to change there, because he was kind of just having a good time most of the time, up until a certain point. And certainly the POW thing was part of it. Maybe it happened a little before that, I'm not sure. But that was obviously a life-changing, galvanizing event. And then I think when he got out, it's now you got to figure out how to survive and how to heal and what am I going to do in life. And then, you know, I don't think he was able to, he had the ambition probably to be an admiral like his father and grandfather, but that wasn't possible because of his injuries. And so this Navy liaison job was a good job. And then when he's around, so he's interested in politics, he's interested in government. How could you go through the debacle of Vietnam and not be interested in foreign policy and American government and world affairs? So he was. And then when he's hanging around as an equal, really, with John Tower and Bill Cohen and Gary Hart, these were his friends. Of course, it enters your mind, well, hey, you know, we're all equals here, except they're senators and I'm not. And I could be. And so, yeah, I think that kind of, all of that moved in that direction then. It was a good spot for him. He would try. He'd try to do it. You know, he's not able to carry a lot of stuff, you know, so I don't know.
So
Biden's a perfect guy, though. It's a good example. All those guys that I named, all those people, being around them, that, you know, that also molds how you view the Senate and government as well, because those are all good people who, you know, aren't so hyper partisan. They're in it for. They were all in it for the right reason, I think. Let's start with Mo. When John was elected, so Mo was one of the other congressmen, and you know, Mo Udall. Boy, you know, when I went back. So I went back in summer of '74. When I went back, Mr. Rhodes and Barry Goldwater were two of the three people who went and told the president he needed to resign. That's pretty amazing to me. It made a big impression. Two of the three people who put country over party were from my state. And then you throw in the likes of Mo Udall on the other side of the fence. And I thought, wow, this is, as Bobby Kennedy said, this can be an honorable profession. Not so sure of that anymore, but I thought so then. And I think Mo proved that over and over and over, but he certainly proved it with John McCain, because when John was elected, Mo immediately took him under his wing, really. Didn't have to do that at all, but it was a nice thing to do, and for our state, it was the right thing to do. He really introduced him to the tribes around the state, and introduced him as a friend and as someone who could be trusted. That wasn't always true in Arizona. Barry Goldwater is another person who had the confidence of the tribes, but you know, for good reason, most politicians didn't. So I think that was a great entree also into all the issues of Arizona that are related to the Department of Interior and environmental issues. And I think John's been great on those issues over the years for Arizona, fought hard for Arizona's environment and for the tribes. And that's because of Mo, I think. And, you know, as time went on, John was returned the favor, really, because he was a true friend to Mo till the end. That harkens back to a time when people were able to put the partisanship aside. Mo Udall, liberal Democrat, John McCain, conservative Republican, and yet they worked together on environmental and tribal issues and other issues from day one. Mo opened the door, John walked through the door. And they're both of them had great senses of humor. They liked each other, got along well. Again, you know, I've always said this about Arizona. Arizona has produced some of the great leaders ever, and some of the worst. So my goal for the future is for Arizona to find some mediocre leaders, because these extremes are killing us, you know. But Mo's one of the greats. And then Barry, you know, again, Barry Goldwater. I mean, to me, he's amazing. I did get to know him first as staff. I was on staff, so that wasn't, you know, that was staff. But then after I was Attorney General, I got to know Barry quite a bit in his later years, you know, and spent, you know, some amount of time with him. I think for John, Goldwater, all of these guys are very blunt, by the way. They're no bullshit guys. McCain, Goldwater, Udall, there's three. If you threw in Sandra Day O'Connor from Arizona also, all super blunt, you know where you stand immediately, you know? So with Barry, I think he had great respect from day one for John McCain. But how will John McCain be now in my world as a politician and a congressman? You know, we'll see. And so they got along really well. They certainly had a love of aviation and adventure and foreign policy. But John had to earn the respect as a lawmaker of Barry Goldwater. And that took a little bit of time. We had to work through that because again, Barry is a guy who you knew exactly where you stood with him at all times, you know, and John earned that respect because he's the real deal. So there was no question that McCain would always have Goldwater's respect as a person and for his military service. But as he then entered into Barry's world, he had to earn that respect, and he did earn it. So then, you know, our goal from day one was for John to be in the Senate, not to be in the House. And we were hopeful it would be sooner rather than later, which it was. But when he then ran for Barry's seat, I think Senator Goldwater was happy about that. It was a good transition. And of course, now we look back and we see that seat and we see Goldwater and McCain. That's pretty strong. Well, I do think that, I think it had a big influence on him being around top senators and being in the mix and seeing that he knew the issues and had the experience as well as them. He had great respect for these senators that he worked with, but you know, he needed to be in the mix as well. Now, it's one thing to say, I could do this. And I want to do it because he wants to serve his country. It's a great way to serve your country. It's another thing to be able to do it, but so, you know, he set down the path and he achieved it. So I think, again, I don't know, he's never really told me this, but I think that if he had his choice, he would have gone on and become an admiral and commanded as an admiral. And there would have been that symmetry there with his father and grandfather. And whether he likes it or not, that would have been something, okay? But that wasn't possible. So there was never a question that he was going to do something in the realm of serving his country. That had to be. He wasn't going to go work somewhere. He wasn't going to go try to make a lot of money. He was going to serve his country in some way. So this, again, was a natural step. And it all worked out. As it turns out, he's been able to do what he wanted to do most. Number one, far above everything else, which is serve the United States of America. He's been able to do it his entire life. That's pretty incredible. Well, I think, yeah, early on he got dubbed the White Tornado. We had quite a few quite a few nicknames. The newspapers were calling he and I Batman and Robin, which I didn't like. He was Batman, but I didn't like being Robin, just to be honest with you. I mean, Robin's kind of a nerd. But yeah, and then, you know, I remember the paper having a big thing, the White Tornado. Well, yeah, he's the White Tornado because he was everywhere, and you know, when he walks in, he's never been shy, and he's gonna mix it up. He's going to, you know, things are gonna happen. It's not gonna be boring, okay? I will say this, from the day I met him, it's never been boring around him, ever. I can't ever remember one time that it's been boring. And that's great, even if we're in a boring setting. If John's there, great, because it won't happen. Now, sometimes he could be a little more boring. It would be okay with me. You know, we used to go on vacations, and he was the worst because, you know, I can set up on the beach and lay there all day. I have no problem with that. We would set up on the beach, you lay back, and he's pacing like, oh, where are we going now? Yeah, what are we doing here? What's going on? Hey, sit the hell down. Read a book, do something. Yeah, let's go on a walk. Let's go on a hike. Like, oh my God. So I cut that out long ago. Yeah, because he's a pain in the neck. But he's, yeah, he is a white tornado. It's always, you know, if you ask, you probably have, but ask any of these senators who have traveled with him around the world. The ones who I know that I've talked with, they're like, oh my God. They call the McCain death march, you know. It's like they have to go, you know, take a couple of days off when they get back because he's relentless. And he's the oldest guy. And like I told you, you know, he just keeps going. So yeah, he's gonna, nothing's changed. We'd send college interns out with him, you know, spend the day with him. And they're like, hey, I gotta call in sick tomorrow, I'm exhausted. It's amazing. And it was still true. In his last campaign, that was true. He had an army of college students over there. They were like waving the white flag. We can't take it anymore. We need a break, you know. So it used to always crack me up in recent years when they'd say, oh, he's too old. Yeah, okay, good one. Well, why don't you go ahead and spend a couple of days with him and you tell him if he's too old. I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep up with him when I was in my 20s, much less now. So I don't know how he does it. And he used to have his whole life until recently, until the last couple of years, he had a terrible diet. He can't work out because of his injuries. So can't work out, bad diet, and he goes nonstop and, you know, was rarely down at all. It was amazing. That was a good one too, because that guy, I forgot what he said, but he made some crack, one of the legislators running against John in the first race, made some crack on the stage. No, that isn't what happened. I'll tell you what happened. It's his first race, and I think this guy had called Carol McCain and tried to get some, is any dirt on him or something like that. And so she immediately called John and told him. So when they got up on stage, and this is at like a Rotary or something, you know, very, very, you know, passive place. And John called the guy, I think behind the curtain, and told him, I'm going to kick your ass if you ever do that again. And the guy's like, what? And he goes, you know what I'm talking about. I will kick your ass. Just like that. And the guy went, ugh. And of course, that was the end of him. I think he came in last. So, yeah, that was good. That was a good one. No surprise. Election day, you know, we didn't know for sure how it was going to go. We were, you know, polling, and it's a four-way race, and polling's like, okay, we thought we'd win, but we weren't sure. So this is my favorite part of it. So of course he was very nervous, and he started a tradition then of doing something, and we usually go to movies on election day. And, which is a disaster, you know, because like I would pick something we would like to see, you know. Well, of course he's in there and he's freaking out, and it's like, it's not good. But it you know, it's not a bad idea. I tried that when I ran, and it's okay. But you're kind of distracted, you know. So we go election night, and what I liked about election night was there was a little trailer for some reason behind the headquarters. And that was so we wouldn't be at John and Cindy's house, but we'd be close to the headquarters, but not in the headquarters, because there's a bunch of people in there, and, you know, it's tense. So there are only 4 or 5 of us in there. And one of them was Duke Tully. I'd never met Duke Tully. Again, I'm only 28, you know. I'm a public defender. Who am I? And Duke Tully was the most powerful guy in the state. He was the publisher of the Arizona Republic, and he wielded a lot of power. So I'd certainly heard of him. I knew who he was. And there he was, you know, and he was a big John McCain guy. So that really helped John, frankly. And so here comes the big guy. I get to see the big man in person. He walks in, and He is drunk out of his mind, this guy. And it turns out the guy was a big fake anyway. That all came out later, who knew. But as is typical in Arizona, it's sort of like about 10 o'clock, we're ahead, but it's, it's tight. And like half the returns aren't in, and they're having problems. And they say, oh, the machines are screwed up or whatever, we're not going to know for a while. Like, oh my God, this is killing us, So Duke Tully, the big, all-powerful guy, goes, I have connections, I'll find out. He walks out drunk, comes back in. 20 minutes later, he goes, I have news. So we all, what? He goes, the lead is holding. And we're like, yay. He goes, okay, here's the numbers. They were the exact same numbers. That's why they were holding. This moron had the same numbers that we'd had a half an hour earlier. And he did that a couple times during the night. He would like announce, I've got the real numbers. And they were the same numbers. Like, this is the most powerful guy in the state? Oh my God. But we won, so that was awesome. It was big. It was big. And then sometime thereafter he called me and asked me if I would run his operation. It's first term. He wanted to do everything out of Arizona, which was attractive to me. I really had no interest in going to D.C. He didn't need any help in D.C. He knew D.C., but he didn't really know Arizona, and so we were going to do it that way. So I went back with him, and we did the opening the office and all that, and it was very funny. I went to the orientation stuff with him. Oh man. So he had zero interest in all of that. He was interested in being president of his class. Okay, and it was a big class. I can't remember how many, but 15, 20 people. He wanted to be president of his freshman class. Well, it's tough because you don't know any of these people, So we were kind of maneuvering that around, and we worked that, and he was president of his freshman class. But other things, like they had a big thing with all the new congressmen where they tell you how to be a congressman and all this stuff. Well, he sent me. He didn't want to go. And so I'm sitting in there, only staff guy. I wasn't even staff yet. And then they had a drawing for your office. Well, that's kind of a big deal because whoever gets the last one, you get, by definition, the worst office out of 435. I drew like number 2 or something. I was very happy. I said, So I went back, hey, John, I got a great office. It's great. He goes, okay, I don't care. He literally could care less about any of that stuff, But we had some interesting people. John Kasich was in his class. Tom Ridge was in his class. So, this is who I'm sitting with. They're like, who's this guy? He's not even elected. But that's because John was already interested in other things. He was interested in policy. He was interested in moving forward, not in the mechanics of it. And then in Arizona, he was interested in being reelected. Let's put it that way. We had to solidify things in our district, and then we could move on and start having a statewide presence. And that's exactly what we did. Run for the Senate. That's correct. Hey, that's what we hoped for. We'd hope it would all work, and it worked out beautifully. So he was reelected, and then during the next 2 years, Senator Goldwater announced he was going to retire, and we went the next day because there were some other people thinking about getting in. So there was kind of chaos for a little bit, and we called a press conference the next morning. And I was standing there right there next to him. I remember that vividly because reporters started asking whether I was going to run for his seat then. And we hadn't really talked about that, to be honest with you. We were kind of focused on John, and so it was kind of awkward. We're like, we don't know, It was dumb. We should have anticipated that, but we didn't. Anyway, yeah, he was off and running, and then the other people didn't run in the primary, and so we had a statewide office holder in the general, but he wasn't. He was okay, but he wasn't that formidable. Once again, just the hardest worker you've ever seen. I mean, he wasn't confined to neighborhoods. He had the whole state, and it's a big state geographically. But you know, and again, I've run statewide twice, and it's hard to cover the state. It's a lot of work because geographically it's huge. No problem. No problem for him. I mean, he went everywhere. His opponent was an interesting opponent. A guy's name's Richard Kimball. Richard Kimball was the name of the guy in The Fugitive, you know. And so his things were like, he's running, you know, like he's the fugitive or something. And the thing about Kimball, and I liked him. I thought he was a nice guy. But he was about, I don't know how tall the guy was, like 6'5" or something. And he kind of looked like Robert Redford. He was a good-looking guy, and not just for politics, you know. People, they'll say, oh, this person's very attractive, male or female, but they should put an asterisk. This is for politics. In the real world, you know, not that great. Kimball was a legitimately good-looking guy, about 6'5", huge guy, and but he was a little, he was kind of Ted Baxter-ish, you know. I don't think he was a deep thinker. Maybe he was, but it didn't show. Let's put it that way. So it all came down to, we had a debate against him, and we were pretty solidly in the lead, and but we were concerned about the debate because I think that was Kimball's only chance. It was going to be watched throughout the state, and if it was some sort of fiasco, then, you know, maybe he could catch up. If we could hold our own in the debate, then you know, then he would win. I can tell you something funny about that. John didn't like this either, but it wasn't me who did it, but I approved. I was all for it. So there was a radio ad that we ran. It won awards. It won an award for best radio ad in the United States that year. It's a great ad. Kimball had put out a press release that said John McCain was bought and paid for by lobbyists or whatever, someone. And that went out first thing in the morning. Then Kimball went to northern Arizona on a plane. When he got off the plane, this reporter says, "Do you really believe John McCain's bought and paid for?" And he goes, "Oh no, I wouldn't say that." He goes, "Well, you did say that. It's right here." He goes, "What? Let me look at that." "Oh, no, that's too much. I wouldn't say that." So we cut this radio ad, and it was verbatim, the tape. And then the announcer, deep voice guy, comes on, he goes, "John McCain for U.S. Senate. We know where he stands, and so does he." And so that was great. And we learned that Kimball hated that ad. He went nuts. And I remember he called our campaign manager, and he demanded to be taken off the air. "You're misrepresenting me." And he said, "Misrepresenting you? It's verbatim. We're playing you, you know." He goes, "No, take it off." So we didn't. Well, then it went off the air, you know, for a couple weeks. And then our guy, he bought every minute of time the day of that debate and put that ad back on. And so when we walked into the debate, Kimball was like livid. He was insane. He was a mild-mannered guy. He was a nice guy, but he was just so pissed. And it worked beautifully, because then when it started, and the debate started, and John was, because Kimball was such a giant, he was standing on this thing behind the podium so that they would be a little more equal. And John said whatever he said, you know, very senatorial. And they go to Kimball, and he just was erupted like, I can't believe this, and this guy's fake, and look, he's even standing on a milk carton. You can't believe it. And on TV, he looked like a madman. We're like, oh, this race is over. This is done, guy. And it was. So he creamed it. It was funny because, yeah, he was very upset that we were playing his own words. John didn't like it, though, when he found out that this was all going on. He's a very, you know, he wanted to just go straight ahead, and you don't have to screw with the other guy too much. He's never been for that. He's never had to, and he never really has done it. If you look at his presidential campaigns, he wouldn't do it there either. So I viewed that as fair game. I didn't see anything wrong with that, but it was a good one. Well, in all these campaigns, up until then, so we'd had 82, 84, 86. Cindy, look, Cindy has always done anything that's asked of her. She's there, and she will do it, and do it with class and with integrity, and she'll do it well, always. But there's definitely been a change over the years. She and I are exactly the same age, within one day. Okay, I think I'm older than her, which she lords over me by one day. But so she was young and kind of thrown into this, and she didn't really like it that much. There's no question about that. And most of the way, she did an amazing job always, but she really wasn't that much into it, because it's kind of weird. It's a weird deal running for office, and you have to suffer a lot of indignities, and so I think over time she then became kind of all in, and her own person as well. Once she was comfortable being her own person and not worrying that it would reflect poorly on John or something, that she could disagree with John, she could say what she wanted to say, then it's been a lot easier and better for her, I think. But at the time, I think it was a totally new thing. She'd never done anything like this. So, yeah, she was there. She did whatever needed to be done, always. So I think she's always been an asset. She's just become more of an asset as the years have gone by. I think that helped too, is that Cindy's a native Arizonan, and her parents were, well liked, and those roots were pretty deep here. So I think that's always been great, because again, then the family is an Arizona family, So I think that's always been helpful. And I thought her parents, I liked them both a lot. They were 100% supportive. They loved John. They loved John McCain from day one. They couldn't have been more supportive of him in all of his political efforts. They were always there. And really, I thought they were really good people. They were supportive on all fronts. They were just always there. And they were again regular people. At least they didn't come from a political background. So this was new to them as well. But they were no problem. We're there. They were solid. So John and I and Cindy, we go. He's elected, and he decides he was going to go. He wants to go to Micronesia. I think he got invited there, I guess. I didn't know where Micronesia was for sure. I wasn't totally positive, but we went. And so, there's a series of islands we went to. And yeah, and he was, one thing I should have said, I guess, is when I worked for John, he insisted I was in every meeting, okay? That was really unusual, I thought. But he wanted me in every meeting. And even when the other person didn't want me in the meeting, because, they wanted to be with John, not with me. He always had me there. But he's always had great respect for staff, I think, and didn't treat people like staff. Yeah, I'm going to go back to that too. I'll come back to the Micronesia thing. I should tell you this. So the first day I worked for John, again, the time I'd spent on the Hill in college, the congressmen were, they were the congressmen. Here's the staff, So he calls me up and said, okay, tomorrow we'll go meet the staff, the Arizona staff. I said, okay, fine. And he goes, I'll pick you up at 7. I thought, what? You'll pick me up? I thought I'd have to go pick him up, or we'll meet there. No, he won't. And that was the way it always was. He liked to drive. And by the way, not the best. And had no idea where he's going half the time because he was new, you know. But he insisted on driving. So that was the first change. I go, I couldn't really see most of these guys saying, I'll pick you up, the staff guy. So he picks me up, and I mean, we're talking sports, we're talking this. I mean, we just had a great time. And that was actually funny too, because we go and meet the staff. He'd hired the whole staff from the campaign, people from the campaign. And so we meet with them, here's your new boss, me, blah, blah, blah. And they were all nice and everything. And we get in the car, and I said, well, okay. Those guys, they seem fine. He goes, you'll probably have to get rid of half of them. Don't worry about it. I'm like, oh, God, thanks. Thanks a lot. But that was him, you know, and boom, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. You know, he drops me off at my house like 8 p.m. He goes, okay, pick you up at 7. Like, holy shit, what is this? I need some time here, you know. Whew. But that's how it all started. Nothing changed, nonstop, you know. And you know, what are you going to do? I was 28. I'm going to give him some excuses like, hey, I'm tired and I can't do it now. So, you know, we go to Micronesia, and that was hilarious on a couple of fronts. One is when we got to Palau, I had fallen asleep, and so he's like, wakes me up and goes, come on, boy, let's go. And I said, oh, okay. You know, and I'm sure I had on some crummy, you know, rock and roll t-shirt and jeans, and I just walk off the plane. He's lingering in the back, and I walk out, and there's a long line of military people with swords and guns, and like, you know, 2 rows, and we're supposed to walk down between them, and I'm like, what the hell? I have sunglasses, you know, and they're all like, yeah, they do all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, you know, hello. I poke myself in the eye. So I'm sure he's like, God, what a goof. Then they took us to, this is great, they took us to, we had some sort of meeting, and they said, oh, we have a ceremony. It's going to be done in a local park. And so we go. And they want the men, which is John and I, okay, you go up on the stage. And so we go up there, and they go, okay, sit down. It's like, sit on the ground, the stage. We sit down. He said, take off your shirts. I'm like, what? And John's like, just go ahead, you know. And I said, what's going on? He goes, I don't know, just do it. So we take off our shirt. Now we're sitting there with no shirt on. It's weird. He's a senator-elect, you know. And these women come up. They're like, you know, like hula dancer types. And they start rubbing this oil, some coconut oil or some weird stuff on us, and a little massage. And there's like 3 women on each of us rubbing stuff. It's some sort of ceremony. I don't know what was going on. And we're looking at each other. And then they said, and they had this kava, okay? We've made this kava, and it's a special deal, and it's sacred or something, and they give us this kava. And I look at it, and it looks like mud. It's like liquid mud. And I go, come on. He goes, you got to do it, you got to do it. And he goes, just throw it down. It was horrible. Throw it down, and then this thing ends, and now we're all oily, and we put the shirt on. They go, okay, you can leave now. And we had to have someone drive, because we got in the car, and I went, I'm a guy, I mean, same with him, you know, we'd never used drugs or done anything like that. I don't know what this kava stuff was, but we're like, we were wired. We're like, oh man, this is crazy. So they drove us to where we were staying, and we said, hey, John goes, well, maybe we should take a nap. And he said, yeah. And we woke up like 12 hours later. I don't know what all that was, but just the idea that there's a senator-elect here, you know, oil and kava, great, you know. Then we flew back, went right to Washington, and that was just a big moment for me, because I was in the gallery, and I remember, it's happened to me a couple times with him, but that was the first time it happened, was they called him up to swear him in, and he goes, John Sidney McCain, and I couldn't help, I just, you know, I got very emotional, because we'd done it, we did it. It was great, so that was exciting. The other time was in Minnesota when he came out and he was the nominee. I was like, wow, this is great, pretty cool. You remember when I told you I was in every meeting? Well, I went to a meeting with Keating, and when we walked out, I said, that's one of the biggest I've ever met. And I wasn't in any more of those meetings, let's put it that way. So I wasn't a fan of his. It was a complete jerk. Yeah, that was a tough deal because I think that well, it was a lesson learned, for sure. But I think John didn't believe he was doing anything extraordinary or that it was that big a deal. I think he was going to a meeting and saying, you know, hey, which is what he did in the meeting, which is like, you know, just make sure you're doing the right thing here and not screwing some guy over, and that was okay. Well, it's a lesson learned because you just can't do it. And even if you're not, you don't know how it's going to be perceived by the regulator. It certainly is gives the appearance of trying to put pressure on them. It's not ever going to be taken as just do the right thing, give them a fair shake. It's it's a lesson learned. Just don't get involved. Keating moved here and became very omnipresent. He was a very successful home builder. He certainly had he had very conservative views on, and he was really big on certain so-called moral issues. And so he started getting involved in politics, and he would support candidates and get behind candidates and raise a lot of money. He was a good fundraiser, and it all. And then he bought some savings and loans, and that's where it all kind of went south on him. Okay, so he ended up going to prison. Well, in the interim, but he was a big Arizona player, and important to the Arizona economy. So when he was having trouble with regulators looking at some of his bank's practices or savings and loan practices, he looked to some of the senators. He supported people all over the country. Said that hey, I'm getting screwed here. These guys are too aggressive. It's not right, and you need to say something to them. So I think the other senator from Arizona set up a meeting. Hey, let's just go talk to this guy and make sure that he's going to treat this Arizona company fairly. And so John went. He didn't think it was a big deal. It turned out it was a big deal because the regulator then said, hey, these guys are trying to pressure me. They're trying to help this guy who gives them a lot of money, and one thing led to another. So it turned into a big fiasco. So the way, when it hit the fan, basically, he said, okay, how are you going to handle this? So we met over at John and Cindy's house, and several of us who were involved with him are friends of his. And he said, okay, I'm going to call the press in, and I'll answer every question they have. I'm going to stay here as long as they want to stay here. So the opposite of how it's usually handled, which is clam up, I'm not talking, no comment, all of that. He just said, no, so that's what he did. So he had a press conference, I think at his house, as I recall, which is a house Cindy grew up in. And, he said whatever he said. They started asking questions. It went on for, a long time. He's like, no, keep going. I mean, he exhausted the reporters, basically. And that was a great way to handle it, I think. And it showed that he didn't have anything to hide. Having said that, I think he got screwed in the whole deal because it ended up when the Senate decided to take a look at it and have hearings on it, there were 4 Democrats, and they needed to have a Republican. And so he was the natural one to throw in there because he, had done this and had this relationship with Keating. And so they throw him in there. I think he was only in there because he was Republican. And ultimately he was cleared, with the exception of they said, hey, you guys can't have meetings like that. Okay. So, yeah, that was a low point for sure. And here's why it was a low point. It was a low point because people were questioning his integrity. And that's first and foremost for him. And I know, again, because I've been behind closed doors 100 times. I've seen him in situation after situation where something would benefit him and no one would ever know. and he always did the right thing. Not once would he countenance anything like that. So, yeah, like all of us, he made a mistake by going to the meeting, but it had nothing to do with his integrity or some bad purpose. That wasn't the case. And so having it portrayed that way and getting lumped in with some, some of these other guys, that was a rough deal. So he persevered. So he was elected to the Senate in '86, reelected in '92. I ran. I announced for Attorney General in '89, and I announced against the incumbent Republican who had been in there for 12 years and was planning on running again. And I really only had two people supporting me. One was Mr. Rhodes and the other was John McCain. Those are two pretty good people to have for me. But other than that, I was kind of a nobody, and this guy was, long-term incumbent. So it was kind of bold to go. But John was, he didn't hesitate for a second. He said, let's go. Let's do it. You should do it. And so throughout all this time, throughout the '80s, until I became Attorney General, I talked to him. Yeah, I mean, we talk, every day, every other day, Saw him a lot, but we were friends, I wasn't staff anymore. Although once you're staff, you're always staff. Look, I could be 60 years old and we were at a Diamondbacks game or a Coyotes game, and I spend at least half of my time being cameraman. And a guy at a Coyotes game actually asked me one time after seeing this go on for, every break, didn't you used to be Grant Woods? And like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I used to be. Now I'm back. So once you're staff, you're always staff. I think that's true for anyone, not just for McCain. And because you want to help him, you want to, have him be in the right light. So yeah, we remained friends there throughout the '80s, and I wouldn't have had a shot at Attorney General without his backing. And now the Keating thing broke right around then when I was running. That was an easy call for me though, because I knew he hadn't done anything that I was concerned about. And I did say, I was asked about it constantly, and I said what I just said. And I'm not going to, and I said that if stepping away or moving away even slightly from my friendship with John McCain is what it takes to be Attorney General, and I don't want to be Attorney General. It's the way it is. So it all worked out. I won, And then he, that passed and moved on. We had a little period in there where he was mad at me for a period of time. That was right around in there. So, so not so much. More so later on there, the next time, So that on that race, I really wasn't involved in that race. I was, kind of I had to do my own thing there. But he kind of stepped away for it's a long story, but, when I became Attorney General, first I had a lot to do, and, I was 36, and I'd never even walked in the office before. Now I have 1,000 people, I have 300 lawyers, so I had a lot to do. He was a senator, he had a lot to do, and so I made the mistake of not doing what we'd always done, like talk every day or every other day or whatever, and I just kind of let it slide. And I don't know. At the same time, there were other forces there because I was immediately kind of like someone I know bucking my own party, and it just caused all sorts of problems, unfortunately. But that passed as well. It took a while though. He's a tough customer, So, I think another reason we've always gotten along so well is because we have some similar traits. And so when you have two people who have, a little bullheaded on things like that can make it tough. But at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. who cares? I will say this on 2000. I think the country missed a big bet there. That's when John McCain should have been president. That would have been an amazing thing. The world would be different today if John McCain had won in 2000 or 2008. But 2000, he ran a real insurgent campaign. It was a John McCain campaign. That was the real McCain, and he damn near pulled it off. But I think there were a lot of forces against him there. My own opinion is people don't understand that among the powers that be, corporate America, people with a lot of vested interest in the status quo, their first choice was George W. Bush, but their second choice was Al Gore. Their last choice was John McCain. They didn't want John McCain either because you couldn't count on him. He's going to do what he wanted to do, and they don't like that. Okay, so it was a real uphill climb for him, and he damn near pulled it off. So then, kind of once you get a taste of that, it's hard to not try it again if the opportunity presents itself. 2008, yeah, I was all for it then. I went back to New Hampshire. I spent a little bit of time with him in New Hampshire. What's he doing? Of course, town halls again. Now that race was phenomenal in many respects because John was counted out and was out. I mean, he was out of money. It was kind of screwed up at the start, and he wouldn't give up. He started flying Southwest. He's, standing in line, sitting back there, which is not the greatest image for a presidential campaign, especially because he was, on top. Now he's on the bottom. He's last in the polls. He's flying Southwest. He's carrying his own bag. But he just outworked everybody again. And people could see that he was the real deal again. So I remember the speeches I went to with him early on, pre-New Hampshire, here and other places around the country. The stuff he would talk about, he spent almost his whole time talking about how we needed to do a surge in Iraq, that the war was not lost, that we could win this, it was possible. He spent 2/3 of his little talk talking about that. Nobody wanted to hear that. If you remember at the time, even Republicans were backing off, saying, no, we got to get out of there. But the country was in no mood for, the question is, should we get out now, just admit that we lost, or should we hang around a little longer? No one is saying put more troops in. He was. And that was it made no sense politically. But that's what he felt. And then he threw a couple other things. I think then he started talking about comprehensive immigration reform too. Now these are Republican audiences. So, he'd hack off one side with this war stuff and the other side with the immigration. I go, are we trying to win this or what? I mean, what's the deal? So it looked kind of grim, He's last on the polls. He's talking about stuff people don't even want to hear. But it just slowly turned around. And he did over 100 town halls. I was at his last town hall in New Hampshire. It's phenomenal. And then on election night, we knew that he had a real shot at it, and he pulled it off. It was pretty exciting. That's interesting he said that. I haven't heard him say that. He didn't even say that in private. Okay? So that's all I can tell you, even though it's patently obvious. But yeah, I think what happened there is that he sewed up the nomination fairly early. He had quite a bit of time there. And I don't think he spent very much time thinking about the VP pick because he was going to pick Lieberman. There's no question about it. And that's classic John McCain. This idea of John McCain as a maverick, he is. That's his mentality. And he has been since he was a little kid, okay? So if you say, hey, I want you to, walk out that door, his immediate instinct is to walk out that door. Okay, you know, it's just him, you know. So Lieberman was a perfect pick. Close friend, very well qualified, Democrat, had been on the ticket of the other party. Phenomenal, great pick. And he got talked out of it. So I think I think the reason why the Palin pick was hasty is because he was going to pick Lieberman the whole time, and then he got talked out of it. Now I will say, when I think their concern was that the convention might reject Lieberman. I did go to the convention, and there was a great enthusiasm there for Palin, more so than for McCain. That's how I perceived it anyway. The people who go to conventions are pretty hardcore, you know. I've been to a lot of conventions. I never felt comfortable. There's some real nuts there, in my opinion. And so would they have, even though it would have been suicidal, would they have rejected Lieberman? I don't know that the staff wasn't right about that. And then I think he wanted Tom Ridge, and he's also pro-choice. And so, then he said, well, I want a woman. It's got to be a woman. Well, we didn't have that many. There weren't too many possibilities in 2008 for some reason. It was a weakness of the Republican Party. So how they came up with Palin, I wasn't involved in that. I mean, fortunately for me, that's true. I wasn't. I didn't hear about it until it was announced. And, she started out very strong, and then, then just completely fell apart. So I think, yeah, that was a mistake. And John, he has a couple of, if he's talking about regrets, yeah, he's got a couple, the flag thing in South Carolina, Confederate flag thing. He should have said what he thought, and he should have gone with his gut. That's John McCain. The hell with it. Just do it. It would have been fantastic. But the Republican Party's that's a tough crowd, Look, as much as I would have loved it, okay? Here's the thing. I wanted John McCain to be president for the country. That would, and not because of anything else at all. I mean, it would have hurt our friendship because you wouldn't be able to be around the guy or anything, I mean, I have fun just hanging around with John, and talking sports and doing the things that we do together. That would have all been out the window. I wanted him to be president because he could have been a great president. So I didn't really care. Do it the right way. And I thought it was going to be Lieberman, and that was going to be great. And if these goofballs at the convention don't like it, come on, who cares then? Great, blow up your own party. Or why don't you just, try to do things a little differently? Why don't we say we're going to do things for country, okay? And that would have been great. So I understand. I think it might have been a real fiasco. And then, of course, everybody would be looking at it going, boy, that was the dumbest pick of all time, picking Lieberman. It might have blown up, so who knows? Between those two picks, those are tough. They had their downsides. I think it was portrayed to him that she bucked her party in Alaska. She bucked the oil companies in Alaska. And she's kind of a plain-spoken maverick herself. I think all that's true. And so he's like, great, let's do it, And she actually, I think she performed really well early on. It was just, I don't blame her. I think she shouldn't have been picked. There's a lot of guys I go pick up off the street, and they would do a great job for them, but that doesn't mean they're a good pick. She wasn't a good pick, it's too bad. But I've never heard John say that, so I'm very interested in that. That's my opinion. So from what I know, he's always defends her. And I think that's why he always defends her, because he picked her, okay? So she performed as well as she could perform. I believe that, and I think he believes that. So you know, so why criticize her, you know? And he's the type he owns the pick. I actually don't know exactly who wrote that. Obviously, John always says what he wants to say, and then with a lot of the big speeches, I know Mark Salter is very much involved in it. It sounded like something he would have been involved in, and I think Salter's a great writer, and he's really has always been able to tap into articulating what John McCain feels and believes. And that speech is a good example of that. He did it just right. It was the right thing for the country. It showed a lot of class, and it was no surprise. John's always been that way with regarding his opponents in races. He doesn't personalize it. He doesn't view them as the enemy. And he understands that it's not good for the country when that's allowed to happen. And so at that town hall, when the woman started saying very derogatory, misleading things about Barack Obama, yeah, he corrected her right then and moved on. He wouldn't allow it, okay, as opposed to others who, you know, get the chants going and things like that. That was great because it was obviously unplanned, and it showed the character of the man, that he would stop it right there. The easy thing to do was just to let it happen and let the crowd, you know, say whatever they said. But he had to draw the line. He drew the line without hesitation. The other thing in that campaign that people forget about is the Reverend Wright issue was a huge issue amongst Republicans in particular, and perhaps with swing voters in that race, that Barack Obama had spent so much of his life, adult life, with, you know, this Reverend Wright guy who was quite the character, you know, and Republicans thought that was a big issue, and they wanted to wrap Obama in there with Wright. And if you recall, McCain would not allow that to be brought up. That was a very good issue for him, just politics, just talking about politics. That was a good issue for him. He wouldn't go there. Why? Because, again, that then starts, even if you think that issue was legitimate, it's a very slippery slope to racism, okay? And he didn't want to go anywhere near that. So he just said, no, that's off the table. It's not to be brought up, not to be discussed, period. And I know a lot of Republicans think that was a huge mistake that he made, but it wasn't a mistake because it was the right thing to do. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. He, you know, I think John would tell you today, I mean, he shouldn't have very many regrets about this life that he's lived. But the couple that he has is when he just, you know, didn't follow his gut. But that's okay. You know, he knows this is not a straight line in life. There's going to be curves and corners, and that's the way it goes. Nobody's perfect. So you're going to make mistakes. The question is, how do you handle those mistakes? And where do those mistakes come from? And how do you do better next time? And on that report card, he's going to get high marks. One thing about being around for a while is you do have perspective. And John knows that this hyper-partisanship that's going on now, not just within the parties, but in the Senate and in the House and at the White House, didn't always happen. It wasn't always this way, and it doesn't have to be this way. It can be different. Some person going there right now thinks that's the way it has to be. They don't know any better, but it didn't used to be that way. Foreign policy in particular stopped at the water's edge, the disagreements. We were together as Americans. You see people throughout American history from each party come together, and it's called a negotiation. It's called compromise. You work out things for the good of the country. You don't wish the president to fail, even if you worked against them, even if you ran against them, which he's had 2 presidents now he served with for 16 years that he ran against. You don't wish them ill will. You want them to be successful. You disagree where you disagree, but let's try to work together. So he knows that. And again, if you care mostly about your country and secondarily everything else, then you need to stand up, and you need to remind people that this isn't right, and it's not good for the country, and that there's a better way. And that's what he's doing. So I think when he talks about, regular order, well, that's not too sexy, that's not too exciting. Well, regular order means we're going to listen to everybody. We're going to listen to every person who's been elected there who has something to say on this issue. And then we'll talk about it, and we'll negotiate, and we'll come up with the best ideas, and then we'll move those forward, and we'll do that all the way along the line. Our government is set up so that we don't have rash, hasty decisions. It's all a matter of compromise and checks and balances. We got to remember that, because now it's my way or the highway, and that's not right. Okay, it's never been what our American government is about, and he knows that, and he's standing up for that. And he also understands that the presidency is a co-equal branch of government. The executive branch is equal to the other 2, but it's not superior to them. He doesn't work for the president. He's not obligated in any way to do what the president wants. And people need to remember that, who are in Congress. They need to vote their own conscience. So who better to tell them that now in his final years than John McCain? Now, having said that, it takes guts to do that, because you just get the heck beat out of you, especially nowadays where it's 24/7, instantaneous, everybody can comment, and they do. You have to just say, I don't care. I'm going to do what I think is right. And with John McCain in particular, that means that you can't do it for the adulation of people, because he's going to piss off the right and he's going to piss off the left. There's no question about that. That's how it's going to work. He is a conservative. So this has always happened with him. Democrats will think he's great, and then all of a sudden, he is a conservative, so they disagree with him. Oh, that guy, you can't depend on him. Republicans, when he does do things the right way and compromises and works together with Democrats, oh, then he's the worst. So that's the plight of the statesman, I think, is maybe you do it for history, or don't worry about history and do it for love of country. And all I can say is if John McCain, on a daily basis, when they're beating the hell out of him, when they're really leaving him for dead almost on a daily basis, for 5.5 years, if he can do the right thing and stand up for his basic values in that situation, these politicians who come and go, they're not going to intimidate him. He's a tough guy, but most importantly, he's a principled guy, and he always has been. So I think his legacy will be that hopefully people can see how he's lived his life and say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about the politics all the time. I'm just going to do what I think is best for the United States. If you love your country, do what you think is best for your country. And if that makes me unpopular and I can't be in office anymore, so be it. There's other things to do in life. But if enough people do that, then we can make America greater. We're already a great country. We don't need people making us great. But we can be greater. We can do better than we have in the past. And that, I think that will be his legacy. And hopefully, hopefully we'll see a turn here when men like him stand up and do the right thing, that it'll be enough of a turn that we can get back on track. I think on some issues, if you look at how John has served as chairman of the Armed Services Committee, it's the way it should be done. Everybody gets an input. Everybody can offer amendments. You know, the bills go out unanimously. You have liberals, you have conservatives, you have hawks, you have, you know, not doves, but moderates, you know. And yet, somehow, they all come together. It's pretty amazing. Well, that's because he can control that. Now you have these other big issues, and everybody trying to, and the Democrats did the same thing when they were in charge, trying to just to cram this thing through, and we're going to do it our way because we can, rather than doing it the right way. Well, he's opposed to that, and he's going to fight against that and work against that. But then when it's all said and done, you've got to just balance everything here. And if you look at a health care bill, and it's just not even close to anything that makes any sense to you, and it hasn't been done correctly, then you vote no. Then it comes up again, it's kind of thrown through, you vote no. Tax reform, tax cuts, that's a tough one, because this is a bread and butter issue for a conservative, and he is a conservative. He cares about the deficit, but he also cares about not having an omnipresent government, and in particular in getting into your pockets every 5 minutes. So he's for tax reform. I think he would ultimately be for a flat tax if we could do that. So now you say, great, we're going to get this done, and we're going to have some regular order, and they start doing that, and then it turns out to be some sort of, you know, another crummy approach. Not as bad, more regular order, but not as bad. And then he has to make a decision. I think that one's just, look, if I say no to this one and this is killed, we will never get any sort of tax reform. We're not going to, when are we going to get it? Democrats will come back, and they're not for it. And this is a fundamental issue, so I'm going to vote for it. Healthcare, we will resolve that at some point in time. We're going to keep working on that. If the Democrats take over, they will work on healthcare. But they won't come back to tax reform. So this was their one chance, I think. So I think he just thought, this is a key issue, and it's the only shot you're going to have. So he voted for it, you know. It's not great. Writing in the margins and all that, that does happen, by the way. That's not as unusual as you think. It's kind of a foolish way to do things, but that's how they are. So I don't know. It would have been easier probably for that line of thinking just to say, just vote no on all this stuff. But if you saw John yelling at the Fox reporter, he said, are you just going to oppose Trump on everything now? And he said, that's a stupid question. Why would you ask that? Well, that's the way it is. He's not trying to secure a legacy or secure a place in history. He's just looking at them one at a time. That's what he's doing. He's calling them as he sees them. I think that's what he's always done. So on this one, I think that was a tough call, but he just said, this is our one chance at doing some tax reform. I'm for tax reform, so I'm for it. Well, it was closer to regular order. I don't know. I didn't follow exactly how it all came about. I just know when it all came down at the end, it was kind of a big mess. And it's still a mess. They're still adding crap in, you know. And the point was to simplify it, you know. And Paul Ryan even said that. No, look, it's going to be on a postcard and everything. Well, now they're still trying to get deductions here and add this and add that. But you can see why. So it's the Republicans doing it, and they've got these deficit hawks, and so you got to deal with them. And then you got people who would, you know, they just want to slash things for the wealthy, and it's hard to cobble together enough votes to get anything done. So it ends up being a mishmash, unfortunately. Now, another way to do it would be to let the Democrats be involved as well. Now you don't need every single vote of the Republicans, but they just refuse to do that for some reason. I don't get it. Cindy called and told me, and you know, but at that time, you know, it wasn't the worst case diagnosis. It was just that, you know, just been found. They'd just done the operation, and here's what, and you know, everyone was very hopeful at that point in time. So that was a real blow, though. But then the diagnosis came in, you know, sometime after that. I think I was on a plane when that happened. So when I landed, I talked to Cindy, and you know, that was bad. That was a shocker, you know. I will tell you about that though, because I went up. So I think that was on like a Thursday or something. I was in LA, so I came back to go up there on Saturday, up to Sedona, and I went alone. And I have to say, when I started getting close, I had a lot of trepidation. I was getting kind of emotional, and I was worried about it. I didn't know what I was going to see when I got there. I mean, I thought, is he going to be in bed? Is he going to be, you know, what's the deal here? I don't know how I'm going to handle this, you know. And so, but I drove in, and I went, and I pounded on the door, because it was kind of open. And Cindy yelled, "Oh, we're out here on the porch," you know. So I walk through, and John says, "Hey, boy, where you been? Where have you been? Goofing off? Get over here. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Okay, get your shoes on. We're going on a hike, and then oh, what about those Diamondbacks? What about, you know?" Nothing changed. It was like nothing ever happened. Something had happened, okay, but with him, nothing happened. He was the chef as usual, you know, making ribs and doing that. We had the game on, and you know, so that was John McCain. It was like, okay. Now we did have a couple of moments alone there where we talked about it. And we talked about Mo Udall, and you know, John was one of the people who stuck with Mo when nobody else did. Nobody would visit him anymore, and he told me, you know, I hope people are there for me like that. And I said, well, you know, they will be. But he was kind of resigned. He knew that this was a tough one, you know. Now I did remind him. I said, you know, you've been in this position before, where the odds are overwhelming that you're not going to make it, and you have made it. And he said, yeah, I have, but this is probably it. I said, well, you know, we'll see. So it's tough. You know, it's a tough deal. But then, you know, again, back to normal, and the doctors we knew were going to tell him, do not go back to Washington, do not fly, whatever you do, don't fly. It could be fatal. And he'd already decided, because if they tell me you will die, then I won't fly, we'll figure out another thing. But if they just say, don't do it, it's very risky and all that, then I'm going. So he went. It's crazy to go. Crazy to go. And then, of course, he walked in, gave his speech, ended up giving the thing. It was fantastic. It's amazing. Good. As far as I know, I mean, Cindy has taken control and has, you know, and she's just been what you would expect from her. She's been, she's there 100% to do whatever needs to be done, and kind of managing everything for him, so that he gets the best care, so that there, you know, whatever can be done will be done, so that he's treated the right way medically and just as a person. She's a rock now. She's always done the right thing, always. She's pretty amazing here. Now you know, so. I think the only problem has been John refusing to rest. And again, that's no surprise. But, you know, of course, we wish he would. You need to. Anyone else would would be bedridden with the treatments that he's been getting, and yet, you know, he'd go to work every day. I talked to, you know, staff, and they're like, yeah, he's here in the morning and stays, and a couple of times he's gone, he goes home early. That's his big concession, you know. So, but that's just him. That's just the way it is, I guess, that, you know. What's a hero? I mean, a hero is somebody who does the right thing no matter what. And I think John, throughout his life, has been heroic so many times. So we shouldn't be surprised that as he faces this at the end of his life, that he's still heroic, and that if he showed us how to live, he's also showing us how to die. I'll just miss talking to him. I mean, he's hilarious, and my language will improve. That probably, but you know, we mainly talk about. He's very interested in a lot of things. So we'll talk about, you know, politics, and, you know, who's a goof and who's not, and look at this guy. Can you believe this clown? I mean, that's fun. And then of course we're all huge sports fans, you know. This has happened about 4 or 5 times. The phone will ring like at 3 in the morning. Hey, what happened to the Diamondbacks? Dude, what are you doing? And I said, where are you? And he'll be like in Afghanistan or something, you know. I go, hey, you know, there's a time difference. Check it out next time, you know. But then you know, I tell him what happened. Or the Coyotes, or the Suns, or the Cardinals. I mean, he's a huge fan, you know. So that's fun, because he knows the sports. He's very good at it. So I miss all of that. I mean, it's kind of hard for me to imagine. He's been such a part of my life for so long now. I haven't really come to grips with that. So yeah, it'll be a big hole for those who are close to him, but a big hole for the country as well. It's hard to fill the shoes of people like that. I don't think you do. You just have to hope that he inspires others to be like him and step into those shoes. Yeah, so Sydney's coming in, and Andy, and the first time I met them was when we floated down the Colorado. And Sydney was in high school. Andy was at Vanderbilt. And Sydney had Ed Meese's daughter with her. She was really a nice gal. But anyway, we had a blast. But John and I went down a couple times. He's gone down several times. Once again, you know, he won't. They tried to get him to take the mule. Hey, at least in my day, he would never do that. It's like, that's weak, you know. But he, you know, he's all, you know, it's hard for him to get around. That's a tough, for me, I think that's a tough hike. He calls me one day. This was like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks, whenever it was. They're going to have a break. Oh, it's Thanksgiving. He's right around then. Pick up the phone. Hey, boy. What's going on? He always calls me boy. What's going on? I said, I don't know, nothing. What are you doing? He goes, okay, well, I'm going to get some rest. I'm going to get some rest. And I said, I need some rest, so I got a private plane. You know how I hate that? And I'm like, yeah, I know. I can't believe you got a private plane. He goes, yeah, I did. And guess what? It's 5 hours late. And I'm like, oh, no. He goes, yeah. Wait a minute. What? Oh, shit. Okay, it's here. So, yeah. that was the conversation. But he finally got a private plane, and it's 5 hours late. So he couldn't. He's crazy. This is hilarious.